When you play the Game of Thrones, you
Subscribe and like.
or you die. There is no middle ground.
Alright, welcome back to the Grease Comedy YouTube channel. Today's video, we are going to be talking about Tyrion in A Dance with Dragons and if George R.R. Martin maybe made a mistake in how he executed getting Tyrion into the Meereen plot. And I think one of the things that I've learned, even from my Dance with Dragons kind of reread that I've been doing, I don't know, that series, I started it, it'll finish at some point, but I just haven't gotten to wanting to finish Dance with Dragons. But I will say, Tyrion is one of the weirdest characters, I think, of the book because he starts out in a pretty strong spot. Like, I think all of his stuff with Illyrio is pretty good, and then some of the stuff with Young Griff, or I'd say all the stuff with Young Griff is pretty much some of my favorite stuff of the book. But then after he leaves Young Griff, or he doesn't like willingly leave Young Griff, but after the Young Griff plot is departed by Tyrion, Tyrion to me becomes easily one of my least favorite POVs of the book, and some of my least favorite chapters of the entire series. I've kind of thought about the way George is trying to get Tyrion into the Daenerys arc. That's obviously what it was all kind of leaning to, or what it was all leading to. But to me, could there have been a better way of doing it, right? And I've kind of thought about this so much because the problem is Tyrion, I like the way that he starts out, is that you have to change the way he gets to Daenerys. And you also have to think about it like this. George also didn't want Young Griff to be going to Daenerys. He wanted Young Griff to go to Westeros early. So you can't just say, oh, well, Tyrion doesn't get kidnapped. He just stays with Young Griff's, party. Because that's not the case either. So how do you fix Tyrion necessarily? And I've thought about this. If you think about A Storm of Swords, you know that Tyrion has to leave King's Landing. But the issue is he is a character that has spent the last two books in probably the best or one of the best plot lines of the entire series. And so you're taking him out of a situation where he's in one of the most popular parts of the book, and you're placing him in, Essos territory where, yeah, I'll be honest, Essos is not my favorite area. I feel like when characters go to Essos, usually their story gets very uninteresting. Outside of Daenerys, she's, the one that starts out in Essos, but Arya, when she goes to Essos, not as interesting as I'd say the first three books. Samwell, when he's in Essos, isn't my favorite stuff to begin with. Even if you want to look at, like, for instance, Quentyn as well, I don't like Quentyn either. He's one of my least favorite POVs of all time in the series. How do you kind of fix that issue if it is an issue for you? And to me, I've kind of thought about this, and I think that something else George could have done is maybe he could have combined the Quentyn and Tyrion arcs of this book. Maybe, how Oberyn says, like, he would have taken Tyrion back to Dorne, and maybe they would have done some stuff. What if instead Varys sends, Tyrion to Doran Martell, right? And, that would be interesting because we don't know exactly what Doran Martell would do with someone like Tyrion, right? I think Doran Martell, being a very cautious person, would also then probably send him away because you can't just keep Tyrion in Dorne. That would get out pretty easily. And so maybe you have the situation where Doran sends not only Quentyn to bring the Dornish alliance to her, but also send Tyrion there as kind of a gift, whether, if Daenerys wants to kill him or you have him as an advisor. And some of the things that I think would have been the problems with Quentyn's story arc could have been actually fulfilled here with Tyrion. You could have had Tyrion reacting to, Quentyn thinking, oh yeah, he's just going to swoop in and Daenerys is going to pick him up, even though Quentyn's not the most attractive guy in the world. He isn't really bringing anything to Daenerys outside of just a promise that the Dornish will back her, but he doesn't bring any type of army, any of that proof. Tyrion could have, just like he does with Young Griff, challenged some of those beliefs in Quentyn and made, I think, that story a little bit more interesting. And Tyrion, being a very smart character as well, could have helped with some of the issues that I have with Quentyn, where he just gets extremely lucky. It's a lot of coincidences. It's like, oh, how convenient, a sellsword company that's going directly to where, Quentyn needs to go. Or how convenient, Quentyn is being sent on a mission that goes directly to where he needs to go to get to Meereen to desert and get into Dany's camp. How convenient. I think it would have fixed some of those issues because you have a compelling character like Tyrion that would have been able to work out some of the issues they had. But I don't know. There's a lot of things you could have done with Tyrion. I don't necessarily think that would have worked. I think, you have issues with, like, how Doran Martell would respond to somebody like Tyrion. It'd be too much of a risk, maybe, as Varys thought. And the other issue you have is you then don't have any of the stuff with Illyrio. But what I think could open it up is that instead of, having Tyrion have that whole first half of the book to really introduce Young Griff as a POV and the Illyrio stuff, Maybe we just see John Connington from the very beginning of the book instead of him coming in like the second half of the book. Maybe we see John Con and Illyrio talking instead of Tyrion, and you would have seen, young Griff a bit more earlier on through John Con's perspective instead of Tyrion's, even though I think Tyrion adds a lot to it. And then the problem, again, it's kind of a domino effect, is how then do you get young Griff to get into his head that maybe he should go to Westeros now instead of waiting? Now, I think the obvious solution there is, well, all these characters with young Griff, they're basically completely invented in this book. So any of these new characters around, young Griff could have been crafted to challenge, his beliefs and what they should be doing. So, or just any random like person that seems kind of wise or whatever that they're meeting in any of like the free cities, for instance, any of that could have worked. So I do find it to be interesting because Tyrion, to me, he does take a noticeable dip in quality from the first three books to the fifth book because, the first three books are, really heavily building him up as a character, but are also forwarding the plot quite a lot. And that's something that Tyrion really doesn't do in Dance. Tyrion in Dance, it feels like just almost purely a character study of, how does he react to the stuff that happened with Tywin and Jaime and Shay, and how does that affect him, and how does he move forward through that, and the questions that he has, about Tysha and things like that. How does he move forward? But his plot doesn't necessarily move the plot forward outside of like the young Griff stuff. And I'd say some of his stuff with Jorah is just some of the worst of the entire book. So yeah, I think that either way, I think that George should have cut down Tyrion's chapters with Jorah. I think that he could have done what the Quentin route is, right? Quentin just finds some fast travel and he's in Meereen. I would have just preferred that to just Tyrion and Jorah just walking along, and it's just not very entertaining at all. And also there's a little bit of, conveniences there as well, like there is with Quentin. So I don't know. What do you guys think about Dance with Dragons? I've just noticed, and I've really noticed this because in Feast for Crows and my retrospective of it, I went through that book fairly quickly and did my series pretty quickly on it and finished it up. But A Dance with Dragons, to me, I started doing, right before summer, and I got through like the first two parts, and I'll be honest, I just didn't really find myself enjoying that much of A Dance with Dragons outside of certain plot lines, and I know that's because I've already read the book. I know what to expect from some of these plot lines. It just, I don't know. I feel like Dance to me that when you first read it, I think it's better. But I think as a book to reread of all five of them, it's probably my least favorite to reread because you just have so much inconsistency in the writing in terms of, great chapter to pretty bad, pretty mid to not very good chapters. And yeah, I don't know. Let me know what you guys think about Dance with Dragons, because this is somewhat of a Dance with Dragons styled video, just on focusing on Tyrion and what George maybe could have done differently, or maybe you think, he did pretty good with Tyrion's plotline. But let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you guys all in the next one. Bye, guys.